I was to look forward to the solo exercise of the young Marines. The world was there for the taking. Then, I felt the presence of that old man, 70 years young, with a lame leg and all, going to the gun range and his old gun that he owned. The choking look was exchanged between my Marines and me until the master of the gun range bellowed out, "Sir," to that old man. It was here that I began to understand that the spark that had been inside me all along had actually been inside that bush the entire time, waiting to come out. The act that this old man had performed was worth 10 times as much to the Marine Corps than the combined acts that I had accomplished the last 3 times that I had gone out on deployment. To begin with, I want to share an experience that happened to me on the first day, but that, of course, is available only to subscribers, since we produce such type of material each day. The golden rays of the sun in the state of California were beating in my skin, while I could see the drops of sweat dripping from simply stepping out of the truck due to the fact that I was all wrapped up in civilian clothing. It was Saturday, the last one in July, and I had decided to take out some time from my busy schedule in order to meet a couple of my operational colleagues so that I could share a bit of whatever it was that I had managed without the hassle of red tape, like the first time it happened, which was in the Marines. Guns, target practice, no bureaucrat in sight. "This is going to be sweet, Staff Sergeant," Rodriguez said, grabbing his rifle case from the truck bed. "No brass watching, no range safety officers treating us like we've never held a weapon before." I nodded, watching as Thompson and Martinez pulled their gear from the other vehicle. We were all young. I was 28, the oldest of the group. Rodriguez was 24, Thompson 23, Martinez barely 22. Between us, we had 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan, countless training exercises, and more range time than most civilians see in a lifetime. We thought we knew everything. The range was a private facility about 40 minutes from Camp Pendleton. I discovered it through a friend who'd retired a few years back. It catered to military and law enforcement, but on weekends they opened it to members. The owner, a former Army Ranger, ran it with military precision, but without the usual Marine Corps attitude. "Staff Sergeant Mitchell," the range master greeted me as we approached the check-in desk. His name was Carson, mid-50s, built like he still hit the gym every day. "Got your squad with you today?" "Just the core team," I said. "Figured we'd work on fundamentals, maybe push out to 500 yards if the wind cooperates. Lane 3 is open. You know the drill. Brass goes in the buckets, targets stay inside the berms, and if I call a ceasefire, weapons down immediately." "Roger that." We headed to our assigned lane, a long stretch of range that extended out to 600 yards. The facility was beautiful, well-maintained berms, covered firing positions, and steel targets at various distances that rang like church bells when you hit them. Rodriguez was already setting up his rifle, a custom AR-15 he'd built himself. Thompson had his M4 variant, similar to what we carried on deployment. Martinez preferred his grandfather's M1 Garand, a beautiful piece of history that he'd restored himself. I was unpacking my own rifle when I noticed the old man. He was maybe 70 years old, thin but not frail, with silver hair cropped military short. He wore faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a ball cap that had seen better days. What caught my attention was the rifle he carried, an M14, original Vietnam-era wood furniture, worn but immaculately maintained. "Check that out," Rodriguez muttered, nudging Thompson. "Grandpa's going to try to relive the glory days." Thompson snorted. "Bet he can barely lift that thing." I should have said something. Should have reminded them that you don't judge a book by its cover, that every veteran deserves respect regardless of age. But I didn't. I was 28 years old, confident in my abilities, and I made the same mistake they did. I assumed the old man was just another weekend warrior trying to recapture his youth. The old man moved slowly to lane 5, 2 positions down from us. He set down a small range bag and began to unpack with methodical precision. Every movement was deliberate, economical. He wasn't fumbling or uncertain. He moved like someone who'd done this 10,000 times before. Carson appeared at the old man's position. "Good to see you again, Mr. Walker. You need anything set up?" "I'm fine, thank you, Carson." The old man's voice was quiet but clear, with a slight southern accent. "I'll take the usual. 300 yards? Let's make it 500 today. Feeling ambitious." Carson grinned. "I'll set it up, sir." That "sir" caught my attention again. Carson was former Army Ranger, not someone who threw around respectful titles casually. He'd been polite to me, professional, but there'd been something different in his voice when he spoke to the old man, something that sounded like genuine respect. Martinez was watching too. "You think that old guy's for real?" "Probably shot in Vietnam or something," Rodriguez said dismissively. "Probably hasn't touched a rifle in 40 years and thinks he can still do it." I said nothing, but I was curious now. The old man, Walker, Carson had called him, was loading magazines with practiced efficiency. His hands were weathered, scarred in places, but they moved with absolute confidence. No tremor, no hesitation. We got set up at our own lane. I'd planned to start at 300 yards, work on fundamentals with my guys, then push out to longer distances if they were shooting well. But I found myself distracted, glancing over at lane 5. Walker had finished setting up. He'd placed a shooting mat on the concrete, set out 3 loaded magazines, and was now adjusting his rifle. The M14 looked almost too big for his thin frame, but he handled it like it weighed nothing. "Time's on you," Carson called out to him. "Range is hot." Walker didn't respond, just lowered himself into prone position with surprising ease. For a 70-year-old man, he moved well. He settled behind the rifle, adjusted his position slightly, and went absolutely still. "Watch this," Rodriguez whispered. $10 says he can't hit the target." "I'll take that bet," Thompson said, "but only because I feel bad taking your money." I wanted to tell them to shut up and focus on their own shooting, but I was watching too. We all were. The first shot came without warning. The crack of the M14 echoed across the range, and 500 yards downrange, a steel plate rang like a bell. Perfect center hit. Rodriguez's smirk faded. Thompson stopped adjusting his scope. Walker worked the bolt. The old M14 wasn't semi-automatic. Apparently it had been modified, and fired again. Another hit, same spot. Then another. Then another. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits at 500 yards, all within a span that couldn't have been more than 3 inches. "Lucky shots," Rodriguez muttered. But he didn't sound convinced. Walker reloaded calmly, never rushing. He settled back into position, made a tiny adjustment to his scope, and fired another 5-round string. This time, he was aiming at a smaller plate, maybe 8 inches across. 5 hits. Perfect rhythm. No wasted movement. "Okay," Thompson said quietly. "That's not luck." I was already moving toward lane 5. I don't know what compelled me. Maybe professional curiosity, maybe embarrassment at my earlier assumptions. But I needed to see this up close. "Mr. Walker?" I approached respectfully, keeping my voice low. "Mind if I watch?" The old man looked up from his rifle. His eyes were pale blue, sharp despite his age. They studied me for a moment, taking in my age, my bearing, probably recognizing a fellow Marine just from the way I stood. "You're welcome to," he said simply. "But it's just Henry. I don't go by Mr. anymore." "Staff Sergeant David Mitchell, USMC. I offered my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "You can drop the rank. We're both civilians here." "Were you a Marine?" Something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or old memories. "Long time ago, different war." "Vietnam?" 67 to 69, Scout Sniper, 3rd Marine Division. My stomach dropped. Scout Sniper. Vietnam. This wasn't some weekend warrior. This was someone who'd done what I did for a living, except he'd done it in the jungle against an enemy that melted into the population and fought without rules. I apologize, sir. I didn't realize. Nothing to apologize for. He gestured to my squad, who were pretending not to watch us. Those your Marines? Yes, sir. We're just doing some training, working on fundamentals. Mind if I make a suggestion? Please. Henry stood up, moved to my lane with that same economical precision. My squad straightened up immediately, recognizing authority, even if they didn't know exactly who this old man was. May I? Henry gestured to Rodriguez's rifle. Rodriguez handed it over without hesitation. Something in Henry's bearing commanded respect. You could see it in the way he moved, the quiet confidence that came from decades of experience. Henry examined the rifle with professional interest. Custom build, nice work. Who did the assembly? I did, sir, Rodriguez said, dropping the sir naturally despite Henry being in civilian clothes. Good trigger work. What's your zero? 200 yards. Henry nodded, settled into position behind the rifle, and fired 3 shots at a 200-yard target. 3 perfect hits, grouping tighter than anything Rodriguez had managed with his own weapon. He stood up, handed the rifle back. You're jerking the trigger. Just a fraction, but it's enough to throw your group. Focus on the surprise break. Don't anticipate the shot. Rodriguez took the rifle back, looking like he'd just been given advice by God himself. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Henry moved to Thompson next, watched him shoot, gave him feedback on his breathing pattern. Then Martinez, where he complimented the M1 Garand and offered suggestions on sight picture. Finally, he turned to me. Let me see what you've got, Staff Sergeant. I'll admit, I felt pressure. This man had been doing my job before I was born, and he was watching me with those sharp blue eyes that had seen things I could only imagine. I settled into my position, controlled my breathing, and fired a 5-round string at 300 yards. It was good shooting, all hits within a 6-inch circle. Not perfect, but solid. Henry studied the target through his spotting scope. You're good, better than good, but you're thinking too much. Sir? You're calculating wind, elevation, trigger pull, all that's important, but you're treating each shot like a math problem. He tapped his chest. At some point, it has to become instinct. The rifle becomes part of you, and you stop thinking about the mechanics. How do you develop that? Time, repetition, and being willing to trust yourself. He smiled slightly. You'll get there. You've got the fundamentals. Now you just need the miles. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at myself in 40 years, if I was lucky enough to survive that long and become half the shooter this man was. Sir, would you mind if we watched you shoot? My Marines could learn a lot. I don't perform for an audience. I'm not asking you to perform. I'm asking if you'd let some young Marines see what mastery looks like. Henry studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but I'm going to need complete silence. And I'm going to explain what I'm doing as I do it, so pay attention. We gathered at lane 5, all 4 of us, watching as Henry settled back into position. This time, Carson had set up a target at 600 yards, a steel silhouette, roughly the size of a human torso. First thing you need to understand, Henry said, his voice carrying clearly despite being quiet, is that long-range shooting is 90% preparation and 10% execution. You rush the setup, you miss the shot. You rush the shot itself, you miss everything. He adjusted his position on the mat. Bone support. I'm not muscling the rifle, I'm letting my skeleton do the work. Muscles tire, bones don't. His breathing slowed, became rhythmic. Respiration control. I'm breathing normally, not trying to force anything. When I'm ready to shoot, I'll exhale halfway and hold naturally. No strain. He settled the rifle. Natural point of aim. I could close my eyes, relax completely, and the rifle would still be pointed at my target. If I have to muscle it there, my position is wrong. His finger moved to the trigger. Trigger control. The sight picture is perfect, my breathing is paused, and now I'm going to press straight back until the shot surprises me. Not jerking, not anticipating, just smooth, steady pressure until the rifle fires itself. The shot broke. 600 yards downrange, the steel silhouette rang. Perfect center mass. Follow through, Henry continued, not moving. The shot's fired, but I'm not jerking my head up to see where it hit. I'm staying in position, maintaining sight picture, ready for the next shot if needed. He worked the bolt, chambered another round. This is the difference between a good shooter and a great one. Consistency. Every shot should be identical to the last. Same breathing, same pressure, same follow-through. Another shot, another hit. He fired 10 rounds total, and all 10 hit center mass at 600 yards. Not just hits, perfect hits, grouped within the kill zone of a human-sized target. When he finished, he cleared the weapon, set it down safely, and stood up. My Marines were silent. Even Rodriguez, who always had something to say, was speechless. Questions? Henry asked. How long did it take you to get that good? Martinez asked quietly. Henry considered the question. I qualified as a Marine Scout sniper in 1967. It's now 2025. You do the math. 58 years, I said. 58 years of practice, of repetition, of treating every shot like it matters, because in my war, every shot did matter. His voice was quiet, but intense. You young Marines have technology I never dreamed of. Better optics, better ammunition, better training facilities. But the fundamentals never change. Breathing, trigger control, position, follow-through. Master those, and you'll master the rifle. Sir, Thompson spoke up, in Vietnam, what was your longest confirmed kill? The air seemed to change. Henry's expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes went distant. I don't talk about that. I apologize, sir. I didn't mean... It's all right. Henry's voice was gentle. You're young. You don't understand yet that some things you don't brag about, even if you're proud of the skill that made them possible. He started packing up his rifle. I killed men in Vietnam. Good shots, bad shots, easy shots, impossible shots. Every one of them was someone's son. Some were fathers. Some were barely older than you. He looked at Thompson directly. I did my job, and I did it well, and I came home. But I don't count corpses like they're trophies. That's not what being a Marine is about. 1,600. The silence that followed was profound. I'd deployed twice, seen combat, taken shots in anger. But I'd never heard anyone articulate the weight of it quite like that. The burden of being good at something that ultimately involved ending human lives. Sir, I said quietly, thank you for that perspective. Henry nodded. You Marines are headed downrange eventually, if you haven't been already. You'll be good at your jobs because you train hard and you give a damn. But remember that being a good Marine isn't just about being a good killer. It's about knowing why you're there, what you're protecting, and carrying the weight of it with honor. He finished packing his rifle case. Now I've got an appointment to keep. It was good shooting with you, Staff Sergeant Mitchell. You've got a good squad here. Sir, wait. I didn't want him to leave yet. Would you be willing to meet us here again? Maybe next month? My Marines could benefit from more of your knowledge. Henry paused. I come here every third Saturday of the month. If you're here, I'm happy to share what I know, but I'm not a teacher. I'm just an old man who likes to shoot. We'll be here, sir. He shook my hand, nodded to my squad, and walked toward the parking lot. Carson appeared at my side, watching Henry go. You know who that is, right? Carson asked. Henry Walker, Vietnam scout sniper. He's more than that. Carson pulled out his phone, did a quick search, and showed me the screen. Master Sergeant Henry Walker, USMC, retired. Distinguished Service Cross, 2 silver stars, 3 bronze stars with V device, and a Purple Heart. Confirmed kills in Vietnam are classified, but the unofficial number is north of 100. I stared at the screen. 100 confirmed kills. That meant there were 100 instances where someone verified that Henry Walker had taken a shot and a human being had died. How many unconfirmed? How many shots where the body was never found or the kill couldn't be verified? Jesus, Rodriguez breathed, reading over my shoulder. He's been coming here for 10 years, Carson continued. Never makes a fuss, never brags, just shows up and shoots. I've seen him put 10 rounds through the same hole at 1,000 yards with iron sights. Iron sights. No scope. Why didn't you tell us who he was? I asked. Because he doesn't want people to know. He's not here for recognition. He's here because shooting is what he knows, what he's good at, and maybe it's the only way he knows how to stay connected to who he used to be. We spent another 2 hours at the range that day, but none of us shot well. We were distracted, thinking about Henry Walker, about what we'd witnessed, about the gap between being good at something and being a master. On the drive back to base, Rodriguez broke the silence. Staff Sergeant, I was an asshole earlier, making fun of him like that. We all were, I said. That's the lesson. We judged him by his age, by his appearance. We assumed he was some old guy trying to relive his glory. We were wrong. You think he holds it against us? Martinez asked. I don't think he cares enough to hold it against us. He's been doing this since before we were born. What do we matter to him? But I was wrong about that. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Carson. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I've got something for you. Henry Walker left it with me. I drove out to the range that evening. Carson handed me a package, a cardboard box taped shut with my name written on it in precise, careful handwriting. Inside was a book. Not a commercial publication, but a handwritten journal. The cover was worn leather, the pages yellowed with age. A note was paperclipped to the front. Staff Sergeant Mitchell, I saw something in you and your Marines. Dedication, potential, and a willingness to learn. This journal contains everything I learned about long-range shooting over 58 years. Techniques, calculations, wind reading, breathing control, mental preparation. Things I never wrote down for anyone else. It's yours now. Use it well. Teach your Marines. Pass it on when the time comes. Henry Walker. I opened the journal carefully. The first page was dated June 1967. The handwriting was younger, less precise, but recognizable as Henry's. Day 1 of Scout Sniper training. Instructor says I'll wash out in a week. We'll see about that. Page after page of notes, observations, lessons learned, diagrams of wind patterns, calculations for elevation, notes on reading terrain, choosing positions, calculating distance before rangefinders existed. And toward the back, dated years later, entries that were darker. Confirmed kill number 37, distance 820 yards. Target NV, A officer coordinating mortar fire. Shot broke clean. He never knew I was there. I can still see his face in the scope. We'll probably see it forever. Some of the guys brag about their kills, keep count like it's a game. I don't understand that. Each one weighs on me. Each one was necessary, but that doesn't make it light. Home in 3 weeks. Don't know if I'll ever be able to explain what it was like. Don't know if I want to. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, reading page after page of Henry Walker's life, and I realized something profound. This journal wasn't just about shooting techniques. It was about the cost of mastery, the weight of skill, the burden of being good at something that involved life and death. The 3rd Saturday of the next month, we were at the range early. Henry showed up at exactly 10:00 hours, carrying his rifle case and that small range bag. Staff Sergeant, he nodded at me. Sir? I held up the journal. Thank you. I don't have words for what this means. Then don't try. Just use it. Over the next 6 months, we met every third Saturday. Henry would shoot, we would watch, and afterward, he would teach. Not just shooting techniques, but the philosophy behind it. The mental game, the ethical weight. He taught Rodriguez about patience, about how waiting for the perfect shot was better than forcing a mediocre one. He taught Thompson about reading wind at long distance, about understanding how a bullet moves through air. He taught Martinez about maintaining equipment, about the relationship between a shooter and his weapon. And he taught me about leadership, about the responsibility of sending Marines downrange with skills that would keep them alive or get them killed. The most important thing you can teach them, Henry said one afternoon, isn't how to shoot. It's why they shoot, why they're Marines, what they're protecting. Because when the moment comes, and it will come, they need something bigger than themselves to hold on to. In October, Henry didn't show up for our regular session. Carson called me. Henry's in the hospital. Heart attack. He's stable, but I visited him the next day. He looked smaller in the hospital bed, fragile in a way I'd never seen. But those blue eyes were still sharp. Staff Sergeant, you didn't have to come. Yes, sir, I did. He smiled slightly. Your squad? They wanted to come. I told them you'd probably bite their heads off for making a fuss. Smart man. He adjusted his position slightly, wincing. I've been thinking. That journal I gave you. There's a second one at my house. My wife knows where it is. If something happens to me, it's yours. Sir, I'm 71 years old, Mitchell. I had a heart attack. I'm not being morbid, I'm being realistic. He looked out the window. That second journal is different. It's about the war, the real war, the things I never told anyone, the shots I took, the men I killed, the cost of it all. Why give it to me? Because you need to understand what you're training your Marines for. Not the glory, not the pride of being a good shooter. The reality, the weight, the way it stays with you forever. He didn't die that day, or that month, but something changed. His shooting wasn't quite as precise. His movements were slower. Age was catching up with him in a way it hadn't before. In January, he called me directly for the first time. Mitchell, I need a favor. Anything, sir. My grandson is thinking about joining the Marines. He's 17, thinks he knows everything. I want you to talk to him. Tell him what it's really like. I met with the kid, Jacob Walker, tall, athletic, full of that invincible teenage confidence. We talked for 2 hours. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him about the pride, the brotherhood, the purpose. But I also told him about the fear, the loss, the way combat changes you in ways you can't predict. My grandfather never talks about Vietnam, Jacob said. Not really. He'll talk about shooting, about being a Marine, but never about the war itself. That's because some things are too heavy to share with people you love, I said. He's protecting you from it. But he shared it with you. He shared the technical parts with me, the shooting, the tradecraft, the mental game. But the emotional cost, that's his to carry, not yours. Jacob enlisted 6 months later. Henry came to his grandson's graduation from boot camp. I was there too, invited by Henry to see the newest generation of Marines step into the legacy. Henry looked older now, moving with a cane, but he stood straight when the Marines marched onto the parade deck. When Jacob passed by in formation, Henry's expression never changed, but I saw his hand tighten on that cane. Proud? I asked quietly. Terrified, he said. I know what he's getting into. He'll be okay. He's got good genes. That's what scares me. I was good at war. Too good. I don't want that for him. Jacob deployed to Syria 8 months later. Henry called me every week for updates, even though I wasn't in Jacob's chain of command and had no direct knowledge of his status. Just tell me he's alive, Henry would say. That's all I need to know. In March of that year, I got orders for another deployment. Afghanistan again, my third rotation. Before I left, I visited Henry at his house. He lived in a small ranch home with his wife, Margaret. The walls were covered with photos, Henry in uniform, young and intense. Henry with Margaret on their wedding day. Henry with his children, his grandchildren. One wall was different. Military memorabilia. His rifle, the one he'd carried in Vietnam, not the one he shot at the range. His medals, framed. Photos of men in jungle fatigues, young faces, some of them never making it home. Coffee? Margaret offered, but Henry waved her off. We'll be in the study. His study was a shrine to marksmanship, books on ballistics, wind reading, long-range shooting. The journal he'd given me was on his desk, open to a page of calculations. You're studying your own notes? I asked. Always more to learn. He gestured to a chair. You deploying? 3 weeks. Afghanistan? Can't confirm the location, but yeah. He nodded slowly. You're a good Marine, Mitchell. Better than good. Your men trust you, and that's earned, not given. But I want you to promise me something. Sir? Don't become me. He looked at the photos on the wall. I was an exceptional sniper, one of the best, but I paid for that skill with pieces of my soul I'll never get back. Every shot I took was justified, necessary, right. But that doesn't make it light. He stood, moved to the window. I mentored you because I saw potential, because I wanted to pass on what I learned, but I don't want you to carry what I carry. Do your job, protect your Marines, come home. But don't let the skill become who you are. Don't let the killing define you. How do I prevent that? Remember why you're there. Remember what you're protecting. And when you come home, let yourself come all the way home. Don't stay in the war. He turned to face me. I never learned that. I came home physically, but part of me is still in those jungles, still looking through that scope, still seeing those faces. I deployed 3 weeks later. Afghanistan was hot, dangerous, and exactly what I expected. My squad performed well. We took fire, returned fire, completed our missions. 3 months in, we were in a situation that required a long-range shot. 800 yards, enemy combatant, confirmed hostile, armed and coordinating an attack on our position. I had the shot. I had the skill. I'd trained for this exact scenario. But as I settled behind my rifle, I heard Henry's voice in my head. Don't let the killing define you. I took the shot. It was necessary. It was right. But it wasn't light. We came home in November. I visited Henry the day after I got back stateside. He knew before I said anything. You took the shot? Yes, sir. Was it clean? Yes, sir. Then you did your job. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed me one. Now comes the hard part, living with it. How do you do that? Honestly, I'm still figuring it out after 50 years. He sipped his whiskey. But I'll tell you what helps. Focus on what you protected. Your Marines came home because you were good at your job. That's what matters. Not the shot, not the kill. The lives you saved by being willing to take that shot. We sat in silence for a long time. Jacob came home last month, Henry said finally. Syria deployment complete. Never fired his weapon in anger. That's good. That's a blessing. He set down his glass. He wants to go to college now. Political science. Says he wants to understand why wars happen, not just how to fight them. Sounds like he's thinking deeper than most. He gets that from his grandmother. Henry smiled slightly. I just taught him to shoot. She taught him to think. Over the next year, our third Saturday sessions continued, though Henry's shooting wasn't what it had been. His hands trembled slightly. His eyes weren't as sharp. Age was winning the war that Vietnam hadn't. But his teaching became deeper, more philosophical, less about the mechanics of shooting and more about the weight of it, the responsibility, The cost. One Saturday in April, we were the only ones at the range. Rain had kept most shooters away, but Henry had shown up as always, and I wasn't about to miss a session with him. We sat under the covered firing line, watching rain patter on the concrete, rifles untouched. "Tell me about your deployment," Henry said quietly. "The shot you took, the one that's still bothering you." I'd never told him the specifics, but somehow he knew. I described the mission, the infiltration, the 800-yard shot, the clean kill, the tactical success, the personal cost. Henry listened without interrupting, his pale blue eyes fixed on the rain. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "The first shot I took in Vietnam," he finally said, "was a North Vietnamese army soldier who was maybe 19 years old, younger than me at the time. He was manning a position that was harassing our patrol. I was ordered to eliminate the threat." He paused, lost in memory. I can still see him through the scope, can still see the moment the bullet hit, the way he fell, can still see his face, even though I was 400 yards away. That was 1967, 58 years ago, and I remember it like yesterday. Does it get easier? No, it gets incorporated. It becomes part of who you are. You learn to live with it, to function despite it. But it never gets easier. He looked at me directly. The people who say it gets easier are lying to themselves. The ones who forget did something to their humanity that I wouldn't recommend. How do you keep doing it? Keep shooting, keep training, keep mentoring? Because the alternative is letting the weight crush me completely. Shooting now isn't about the killing. It's about the skill separate from its application. It's about passing on knowledge that might keep someone like you alive. It's about finding meaning in what I learned, even if how I learned it was terrible. He pulled out his old dope book, the one he'd shown Rodriguez months earlier. Every calculation in here represents a life I might have taken. Every wind correction, every elevation adjustment. I learned these things in combat, which means someone probably died to teach me. That's the weight. But if I can use that knowledge to train Marines who protect others, then maybe those deaths meant something beyond just tactical success. We sat in silence, watching the rain. "You're going to deploy again," Henry said. It wasn't a question. "Probably. Next rotation is in 8 months. You'll take more shots, make more kills. Each one will be justified. Each one will be necessary. And each one will cost you something." He turned to face me fully. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't do what I did. Don't wait 40 years to talk about it. Don't lock it away where it can fester. Find someone you trust, a counselor, a chaplain, another sniper, me if I'm still around, and share the weight. I'm giving you permission to talk about it, to acknowledge the cost, to stay human. I promise. And one more thing." He handed me the dope book. "This is yours now, but I want you to do something different with it. I want you to add notes about the people you protected with each shot, not the targets you eliminated, but the Marines you saved. Focus on the protection, not the destruction. It's a small thing, but it helps." I took the book, feeling the weight of it, literal and metaphorical. "Thank you, sir, for everything." "Don't thank me yet. The hard part is still ahead of you, but at least you won't face it alone." In September, he showed me the second journal. It was thicker than the first, the leather more worn. This one started in Vietnam and continued through his entire life. "I'm giving you this now," he said, "while I can still discuss it. Read it when you're ready. But know that once you read it, you can't unknow it. You'll understand what I carried, what every sniper who's good at their job carries." I took the journal home, but didn't open it for 3 weeks. When I finally did, I understood why. The entries were raw, honest, painful. Descriptions of shots taken, lives ended, the immediate aftermath, but also the long-term cost, the nightmares, The way certain sounds or smells would trigger memories. The difficulty of connecting with people who hadn't experienced war. August 14th, 1968. Confirmed kill 82. Distance 1,070 yards. Record shot for my unit. Everyone celebrated. I threw up behind my hooch after. No one saw. No one asked why. December 1969. Home for 3 days now. Margaret wants to know why I won't talk about it. How do I explain that I've killed 89 men? That I was good at it? That I can still see their faces? March 1973. Civilian life for 4 years now. Still wake up at 0300, scanning for threats. Still hear the sound of my rifle in my sleep. Margaret is patient. I don't deserve her. October 1985. Jacob was born today, my grandson. I held him and promised myself I'd never let him see what I saw, never let him become what I became. Page after page of a man wrestling with the cost of being exceptional at something terrible. The last entry was dated 3 weeks before he gave me the journal. I met a young Marine today, Staff Sergeant Mitchell. He reminds me of myself at that age, dedicated, skilled, hungry to be better. I'm going to mentor him, not to make him a better killer, but to help him avoid my mistakes. To help him understand that skill without wisdom is just efficiency at causing harm. If I can teach him to carry the weight with honor, to stay human despite the job, then maybe my experience means something. Maybe all those kills, all that weight led to this, helping the next generation carry it better than I did. I closed the journal and cried. Not from sadness, exactly. From understanding. From recognizing the gift Henry had given me, not just his shooting knowledge, but his hard-won wisdom about how to live with the weight of that knowledge. The entries I'd read painted a picture of a man who'd been exceptional at his job, but paid for that excellence with pieces of himself he could never recover. The precision of his kills, the efficiency of his work, those were the technical accomplishments. But the human cost was recorded in these pages with brutal honesty. One entry from 1971, 2 years after he'd returned from Vietnam, stood out. Went to the range today for the first time since getting home. Margaret asked if I enjoyed it. How do I tell her that putting rounds down range makes me see faces, that every target becomes someone I killed? That the satisfaction I used to feel from a good group is now mixed with memories of what those groups meant in the jungle? I told her it was fine. I'm getting good at lying to the people I love. Another from 1983. David turned 15 today, wants to join the Marines like his old man. I should be proud. Part of me is. But another part wants to grab him and tell him to run, to choose anything else, to stay as far from war as possible. Instead, I congratulated him, told him about the honor of service, the pride of wearing the uniform. Everything they told us. Everything I believed, everything that's both true and a lie at the same time. And one from 2009, ran into Davis at the VA hospital today, hadn't seen him in 40 years. He's dying, lung cancer from Agent Orange exposure. We sat in the cafeteria and talked about the old days. He asked me if I ever counted my kills, told him I stopped at 100 because the number stopped mattering. What mattered was that each one was a human being. He laughed, said I always was too serious. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should have learned to laugh about it like the others did. But I never could. These weren't the entries of someone seeking sympathy or making excuses. They were honest reckonings with an honest cost. Henry had been a Marine, done his duty, served with honor. But honor didn't make the burden lighter. It just gave him a framework to carry it with dignity. I spent 2 weeks reading that journal cover to cover. Some entries I could only read once before having to put it down. Others I returned to repeatedly, finding new meaning each time. Then I started the third journal, the one he'd been working on specifically for me. This one was different. Less raw emotion, more structured knowledge. It was clear he'd been organizing his lifetime of experience into something teachable, something that could help the next generation of snipers navigate not just the technical challenges, but the moral and psychological ones. Lesson 47, the difference between a warrior and a killer. One section began. A warrior fights to protect. A killer fights to destroy. The actions may look identical, both involve taking lives, but the intention behind them defines what you become. I was a warrior who had to kill. I never forgot that distinction, even when the killing became efficient, even when I got good at it. If you lose sight of why you're pulling that trigger, if it becomes about the skill instead of the protection, you've crossed a line you can't uncross. Every shot I took in Vietnam was to protect my Marines, to complete the mission, to end the war faster. Not because I enjoyed killing, not because I was collecting a score. The moment it becomes about anything other than protection, you've lost yourself. Another section titled, The Sniper's Loneliness. You'll take shots that no one else witnesses. You'll make kills that no one else confirms. You'll carry knowledge of things you did that you can never fully share. This is the loneliness I'm warning you about. Not physical isolation. Snipers work with spotters, with teams, but psychological isolation. The weight of being the one who took the shot, who made the decision, who ended a life from a distance that made it feel both intimate and impersonal at the same time. This loneliness will try to convince you that no one understands. Don't let it. Find people you trust, fellow snipers, mentors, counselors, and share the weight. I waited 40 years to start sharing. Don't make my mistake. Every page was a lesson learned through pain, offered freely to spare me some of that same pain. Henry hadn't just given me a technical manual. He'd given me a roadmap for staying human while doing an inhuman job. The next third Saturday, I showed up at the range with a gift of my own. I'd had it made specially, a shadow box containing a photo of Henry in his Marine Corps dress blues from Vietnam, his medals, and a brass plate with an inscription. Master Sergeant Henry Walker, USMC, Scout Sniper, Mentor, Marine. When I gave it to him, his hands shook as he held it. Margaret was with him that day, and she put her hand on his shoulder. "You didn't have to do this," Henry said quietly. "Yes, sir, I did. You gave me knowledge I couldn't have gained any other way. You taught me not just how to shoot, but why it matters and what it costs. This is my way of saying thank you. It's too much. It's not nearly enough." He hung it in his study next to the photos of his old unit. And every third Saturday for the next 6 months, we met at the range. His shooting continued to decline. The tremor in his hands got worse, his eyesight faded. But his teaching reached new heights. He taught me about the loneliness of the sniper's position, about making life and death decisions alone. He taught me about the ethics of warfare, about the difference between being a warrior and being a killer. He taught me that mastery of a deadly skill required even greater mastery of oneself. In March, Henry had another heart attack. Massive this time. He survived, but barely. When I visited him in the hospital, he could barely speak. "Journal," he whispered. "Third one. Home." "Sir, rest. We can talk about this later." "No. Now." His grip on my hand was weak. "Study. Third drawer. For you." I visited his house the next day. Margaret let me into the study, tears in her eyes. He's been working on that for months. Wouldn't let me see it. The third journal was different from the others. This one was structured like a training manual, but personal. Advanced Lessons for Staff Sergeant Mitchell was written on the first page. It covered everything he'd never had time to teach me. Advanced techniques for reading wind at extreme distances, mental preparation for high-pressure shots, how to lead Marines who would have to take those shots, but most importantly, it covered the mental health aspects, how to process kills, how to stay human, how to come home from war, truly home. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before his second heart attack. Mitchell, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or close to it. Don't mourn. I lived a full life, and the last years were some of the best because I got to pass on what I learned. You're going to be an exceptional sniper. Probably better than I was, with your generation's technology and training. But remember, being exceptional at killing doesn't make you exceptional as a human being. That comes from how you carry the weight, how you lead your Marines, how you stay connected to your humanity despite the job. I was good at killing. You be good at living. That's my final lesson. Henry. Henry Walker died 4 days later. Heart failure, with Margaret holding his hand. Jacob called to tell me. The funeral was private, family only, but Margaret invited me. I stood at attention in my dress blues as they folded the flag, as they presented it to Margaret, as they played taps for a man who'd given his youth to Vietnam and his later years to making sure the next generation didn't carry the weight alone. The ceremony was simple, the way Henry would have wanted it. No speeches about heroism, no recounting of confirmed kills. Just dignity, respect, and the quiet acknowledgement that a warrior had completed his final mission. Margaret held the folded flag against her chest, her face composed despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. 53 years of marriage, she'd told me once. 53 years of loving a man who'd come back from war physically, but had left pieces of himself in the jungles of Vietnam. Jacob stood beside her in his Marine dress blues, jaw tight, eyes forward. He'd completed his deployment to Syria without incident, never fired his weapon in anger. Now he was home, watching them bury the grandfather who'd tried to protect him from the very path he'd chosen. At the graveside, I met some of Henry's old unit. Men in their 70s now, Vietnam veterans who'd served with him. One of them, a former spotter named Davis, pulled me aside. His hands shook slightly. Parkinson's, maybe, or just age, but his eyes were sharp. Henry talked about you, Davis said. Said you were the first person he'd opened up to about the real cost of it all. Said you listened, said you understood. He taught me more than I can ever repay. Davis looked at the casket, his expression distant. He taught us all, but most of us didn't listen. We bragged about our kills, wore them like medals, got together at reunions and told war stories like they were victories instead of tragedies. He turned back to me. Henry understood that every shot cost him something. That's why he was different. That's why he was better than the rest of us, not just as a shooter, but as a man. He never forgot they were human beings on the other end of that scope. Another veteran joined us, introducing himself as Thompson, different from my squad's Thompson, this one with gray hair and a cane. We called him Walker the Ghost back in '68. He could move through the jungle without a sound, disappear into terrain you swore couldn't hide a mouse, best scout sniper in 3rd Marine Division, hands down. What was he like back then? I asked. Thompson considered the question. Quiet, focused. While the rest of us were cocky kids trying to prove how tough we were, Henry was already an old soul. Took every shot seriously. Wrote in his journal after every kill. We teased him about it, called him the bookkeeper. We didn't understand he was trying to remember they were human, trying not to become a killing machine. A third veteran approached, older than the others, leaning heavily on his walker. His name tag read, Mendez. Gunnery Sergeant Mendez, he introduced himself, voice gravelly with age. I was Henry's platoon sergeant in '67, recommended him for scout sniper school. He looked at me with faded brown eyes. You know why I picked him? His shooting ability? That was part of it, but mainly because when I asked him why he wanted to be a sniper, he didn't give me the usual bullshit about glory or being the best. He said, because one precise shot can save 100 Marines, I want to be precise. That's when I knew he understood what the job really was. These men, these veterans who'd served with Henry 50-plus years ago, had traveled from across the country to say goodbye to one of their own. Their stories painted a picture of the young Henry, the Marine I'd never met but could recognize in the old man who'd mentored me. After the funeral, Margaret gave me Henry's rifle. The original M14 from Vietnam, not the range rifle. "He wanted you to have this," she said. "He said you'd understand what it means, what it cost him, and that you'd carry it with honor." I took the rifle home and locked it in my safe. I haven't fired it, probably never will, but I keep it as a reminder, not of Henry's skill, but of his wisdom. Not of what he could do, but of what it cost him to do it. I'm a master sergeant now myself, 23 years in the Corps. I've deployed 6 times. I've taken 17 confirmed long-range shots. Each one was necessary. Each one weighs on me. But I carry them differently than I might have because Henry taught me how. I mentor young Marines now. I teach them to shoot, yes, but I also teach them what Henry taught me, that skill without wisdom is just efficiency at causing harm. That being a good Marine means more than being a good killer. That every shot has a cost, and you have to decide if you're willing to pay it. I keep Henry's journals in my office. Sometimes when I'm struggling with a shot I had to take, or a Marine I'm trying to teach, I'll read them, and I'll hear his voice, quiet and certain, reminding me that the weight is real, but it's bearable if you carry it with honor. Last month, I got a letter from Jacob Walker. He's finishing his PhD now, writing his dissertation on the psychological cost of combat on snipers. He wants to interview me. "My grandfather spoke highly of you," the letter said. "He said you were the student who truly understood. Would you be willing to share your experience? Not the kills, but the cost. Not the skill, but the weight." I'm meeting with him next week, and I'm going to tell him what his grandfather taught me. About mastery and burden, about skill and soul, about being exceptional at something terrible and staying human anyway. That day at the shooting range, the day I met Henry Walker, changed my life. Not because he taught me to shoot better, though he did. Not because he shared his technical knowledge, though that was invaluable. But because he showed me that you can be the best at something and still recognize its cost. You can be a warrior and still be human. You can carry the weight and not let it crush you. I'm not the shooter Henry was. I'll never have his legendary skill or his 58 years of experience. But I carry his wisdom. I teach his lessons. And every third Saturday, I go to that range where we first met, and I shoot at the same targets he shot at. And I remember the old man who taught me that being a Marine isn't about how many enemies you can kill. It's about what you're willing to carry to protect the people who can't protect themselves. What would you have done if you'd been in my position that day? Would you have dismissed the old man like we almost did? Or would you have recognized that mastery comes in all forms, at all ages? Let me know in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. We bring you true military stories every single day.